you and I decided we were going to take our space, and what happened?
Yeah, and then I got into an entanglement with August. That's what I said.
An entanglement?
Yes. Yes.
A relationship?
Yes.
The man who has never been afraid to say what everyone else is too scared to whisper has entered the chat, Dave Chappelle. And this time, the target isn't a corporation, a political party, or a Hollywood trend. This time, it's personal. It's about a mother. It's about a son. And it's about a family that has spent 2 decades selling the world a version of themselves that more and more people are starting to question. Jada Pinkett Smith has faced criticism before. She's sat at her red table, cried on camera, confessed to an entanglement, and somehow walked away with her brand mostly intact. But something is shifting. The tide is turning, and when Dave Chappelle starts talking, people stop scrolling and start listening. Because Dave doesn't throw punches without aim. Every word lands where it's supposed to. So today we are going deep. We are pulling back every curtain, examining every timeline, and asking the questions that the mainstream conversation keeps dancing around. What is really going on with Jaden Smith? How much of it connects back to the environment he was raised in? And why are voices like Dave Chappelle, D.L. Hughley, and others now refusing to stay silent about it? Stay with us, because this one is heavy. Setting the stage, Jaden's public unraveling. Let's start with what everyone can actually see. Jaden Smith, son of 2 of Hollywood's biggest names, has been giving the internet a lot to talk about lately, and not in the way a rising artist hopes for.
I see that you're working with Steven Smith, who designed Yeezy footwear with Ye. What are y'all cooking up?
The moments keep piling up, each one stranger than the last, and people are starting to ask a question that nobody in the Smith circle seems willing to answer directly. Is Jaden okay? Let's walk through the receipts. Not long ago, Jaden showed up at the premiere for Could Have Been Love Season 2. On the surface, everything looked fine. He came dressed, calm, seemingly ready to promote his work and engage with the press. Normal celebrity stuff. But the moment a reporter brought up his new Christian Louboutin collection and casually mentioned that designer Steven Smith had previously worked with Kanye West, that's when things went sideways. Jaden's entire energy shifted. You could feel it through the screen. And then, without a single word, no comment, no wave, no polite exit, he just walked off. Mid-conversation, left the reporter standing there mid-sentence, confused, reaching for words that weren't going to come. Now, let's be fair. Celebrities have bad days. Press junkets are exhausting. Maybe something about that specific question hit a nerve. But here is what people are pointing out. The reporter didn't even bring up Kanye directly. She mentioned a designer. That's it. And if the name Kanye had come up, there are 100 ways to handle it gracefully. No comment. I'd rather not go there. Let's keep it moving. Any of those would have worked. Instead, Jaden chose silence and disappearance. And that choice told a story louder than any words could. But that's just one moment, right? Except the moments keep coming. Weeks later, there was that video from Paris. Jaden was caught on camera reacting to hail. Literally, weather. Like it was the most extraordinary thing he had ever witnessed in his life. And look, hail can be dramatic, especially if you're not used to it. But the reaction had people genuinely concerned, not laughing at him, concerned for him. And then came the bag. Jaden pulled up carrying a tiny dollhouse-style bag. And we are talking about a bag that costs $47,000.
What's up, I'm here at the LV show. I got this new amazing bag here.
$47,000 for a bag that looks like it belongs in a child's toy collection. Now, fashion is subjective. Artistic expression is real. But the internet is not always a kind place, and the comments were everywhere. And buried in all the jokes and reactions, there was a thread of genuine worry from people who have been watching this young man's behavior evolve over the years. A lot of those comments said the same thing. His parents were never really present as parents, that their focus was always somewhere else, and that Jaden paid the price. D.L. Hughley fires the first real shot. Before we get to Chappelle's role in this conversation, we have to talk about D.L. Hughley, because D.L. is the one who brought a lot of this back to the surface with a clarity that caught people off guard. D.L. Hughley stepped in with a pointed, deliberate take on Jada Pinkett Smith, and he didn't soften it. He wasn't vague. He wasn't looking for applause. He spoke with the energy of someone who has watched this situation for years and finally decided that silence was no longer an acceptable response. His argument was straightforward. The chaos in Jaden's life today is connected to the chaos he was exposed to growing up, and the center of that chaos, according to DL, was Jada's choices, specifically the situation involving August Alsina. Now, most people know the broad strokes. Jada admitted on Red Table Talk that she had a relationship with August Alsina during a period when she and Will were separated. She called it an entanglement. The word became a cultural punchline so fast that it overshadowed nearly everything else about the story. And that, DL argues, is part of the problem. Because when the conversation became about the word entanglement, people stopped asking the more uncomfortable questions underneath it. One of those questions is this: how did August Alsina enter Jada's life in the first place? The answer is Jaden. Jaden was the one who introduced them. August was Jaden's friend. He was part of Jaden's circle. He was, by many accounts, someone Jaden trusted and cared about. And then, at some point, something shifted in that family dynamic that nobody in the Smith household has ever fully and honestly explained. DL used an analogy that hit people hard. He said, imagine if your daughter brought home a friend from college, someone who needed a place to stay, someone you welcomed into your home as almost a second daughter, and then you and your partner separated, and your partner started a romantic relationship with that friend, with someone your child trusted, with someone your child brought into the family. Pause on that. Really sit with it. Now flip it, DL said. Imagine if Will Smith had done that with one of Willow's friends. Imagine the reaction. Imagine the outrage. Imagine the headlines, the think pieces, the Twitter threads. People would not have let that go quietly, not even close. But when it happened the other way, the conversation stayed mostly surface level. It got absorbed into celebrity gossip, into the Red Table Talk moment, into memes, and the deeper, messier questions about Jaden, about what it did to him to watch that happen. Those questions got buried. DL didn't bury them. He dug them up, and people listened. August Alsina's story and why it changes everything. To really understand why this situation carries so much weight, you have to understand what August Alsina was going through at the time all of this was happening. Because this isn't just about celebrity gossip. This is about a young man who, by his own account, was in one of the darkest periods of his life. August opened up, publicly, on record, about experiencing trauma from his younger years. He's talked about growing up without a real support system. He was open about the fact that he and his mother were never close. His father was gone. He had no real anchor, no one to call when things got heavy. And things got very heavy. On The Breakfast Club, August talked about going through deep, consuming depression. He said there were moments when he didn't know how to keep going. He admitted that at his lowest points, he thought about ending his life. He said, and this is a direct reflection of his own words, that he was doing everything alone, that he was figuring it out on his own, and that the weight of that was almost more than he could carry. Now hold that image. A young man, grieving, isolated, mentally fragile, without the kind of support structure most people take for granted. And he gets brought into a household, one of the most famous households in the world, by his friend Jaden Smith. And what happens next is what people can't stop dissecting, because the layering here is significant. In his 2020 documentary series, August spoke about experiencing trauma involving someone close to him. He also mentioned that details he had wanted to keep private ended up spreading further than he intended, which caused him additional pain during an already excruciating period. DL Hughley's position on all of this is that context matters, that vulnerability matters, that when someone is in that kind of state, physically unwell, mentally breaking, emotionally raw, and a figure of influence enters that space and gets romantically entangled with them, it raises questions that deserve serious discussion. Not gossip, not memes, serious discussion. And that is exactly what the internet has been doing, loudly. And now, with Jaden's recent public behavior adding new fuel to the fire, the conversation has reached a point where even major voices in comedy and culture are weighing in. Which brings us to Chappelle. Dave Chappelle enters the room. Dave Chappelle has a specific kind of power in American culture. He is not just a comedian, he is a cultural barometer. When Dave Chappelle decides something is worth saying, it carries a weight that very few voices can match. He has walked away from $50 million before, voluntarily, because he refused to compromise his integrity. That's the kind of man we're talking about. And Dave has made it clear, through his specials, through his interviews, through the way he navigates his craft, that Hollywood is not just glamour and fame. He has spoken openly about the pressure the industry puts on people who enter it young and without armor. He has talked about what the machine does to people who aren't fully prepared for what they're walking into. Now, when you take everything that's been laid out about Jaden, the walk-off, the concerning public moments, the way some industry insiders have described his upbringing, the August Alsina situation, and what it means that Jaden was at the center of it, and you run it through the lens of what Chappelle has consistently said about Hollywood, a picture starts forming. Chappelle's critique isn't just about Jada's choices in isolation. It's about the culture that allows those choices to be made, to be softened by media spin, to be repackaged into content, and then to have the real human fallout, in this case Jaden, largely ignored while everyone debates terminology. The question Chappelle essentially forces is this: what does it do to a child to grow up inside that level of dysfunction and public exposure simultaneously? What does it do to a teenager to watch his friend be pulled into a situation with his mother and then have that situation become global entertainment? What does it do to a young man to feel like the most private, painful parts of his world are content for everyone else? Because Jaden hasn't been quiet about feeling exposed. He hasn't been quiet about feeling like trust was broken. There have been moments where he's spoken, sometimes cryptically, sometimes directly, about feeling like the people closest to him didn't protect him the way they should have. He's talked about asking for secrecy and not getting it. He's talked about learning that what he thought was private had been shared. Put all of that together, and Chappelle's position starts to feel less like a roast and more like a reckoning. The Scientology layer, nobody wants to touch. Now we have to go somewhere that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. But if you've been following this story honestly, you know it can't be avoided. The Scientology question. Back in 2008, Will and Jada launched a private school called the New Village Leadership Academy. Both Jaden and Willow were enrolled there. Will described the vision publicly as creating a space where children could feel genuinely inspired, where learning felt natural and joyful rather than forced. On the surface, it sounded like a thoughtful, progressive educational initiative from two parents who had the resources to build something different. But parents of other students started raising concerns. Concerns about the curriculum, concerns about the teaching methodology, and specifically, concerns about the presence of study technology, a learning approach linked to L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology. The school's own website reportedly referenced these methods. Teachers at the institution were, according to various reports, deeply connected to the Church of Scientology. Will and Jada pushed back on the claims. They denied formal involvement with Scientology. But then, actress Leah Remini entered the conversation, and she brought receipts. Leah Remini, who left the Church of Scientology after years of deep involvement and has been one of the most consistent and credible public voices speaking out about the organization, wrote in her memoir, Troublemaker, Surviving Hollywood and Scientology, that she would regularly see Jada at the Celebrity Center. Not once, not twice, regularly. She later reinforced those claims in an interview with the Daily Beast, saying directly, "I know Jada's in. She's been in Scientology a long time." And she clarified that while she never personally saw Will at the Celebrity Center, Jada's presence there was something she witnessed repeatedly. Leah also recounted a bizarre evening at Tom Cruise's home, where Will, Jada, and others were gathered, and Tom insisted the entire group of adults play hide-and-seek across his sprawling property. When Leah hesitated to join in, Tom approached her and told her she was it. She described the moment as surreal and deeply uncomfortable, an anecdote that, in isolation, might seem harmless, but in context feels like a window into a very unusual world. Now, the school that sparked all of this? It eventually shut down. And even after it closed, the questions didn't go away. They compounded. Former celebrity bodyguard Big Homie CC has made claims that certain predatory behaviors within the entertainment industry were influenced by tactics he connected to Scientology. Jaguar Wright has alleged connections between Scientology and what she describes as a hidden influence network operating within Hollywood, and she has specifically brought the Smith family into those claims. Are those claims verified? No. Are they something that can simply be dismissed as internet conspiracy? Given the layers that keep surfacing around this family, fewer and fewer people seem willing to do that. The school shut down. The Scientology questions never did. The parenting conversation. Nobody is winning. Let's talk about something that runs underneath all of this, like a current: the parenting. Will Smith has spoken publicly and at length about his approach to fatherhood. He's described himself as deeply loving, physically affectionate, expressive. He has talked about wanting his children to feel loved in a way that is unmistakable and constant. Most parents would recognize that intention as beautiful, but there have been moments, caught on camera, shared online, where Jaden has visibly recoiled from that affection. Moments where Will has tried to kiss his son on the mouth, and Jaden has pulled back, looked uncomfortable. Made it clear that this particular expression of love does not feel good to him, and Will, in those moments, has pushed back on Jaden's discomfort, explaining that it's simply how he shows love. Here is the problem that people keep raising. If your child tells you, verbally or physically, that a specific form of affection makes them uncomfortable, the loving response is to respect that boundary. Full stop. Not to explain why your intention is good, not to insist that they receive it differently. The child's comfort has to matter more than the parent's preferred expression of love. When those clips circulate, people don't just shake their heads and move on. They file that moment next to everything else. Next to the August Alsina situation and the role Jaden played in it. Next to Jaden's public unraveling. Next to Jada's public confessions and the way they became global content. And the pattern that people see is a child, now a young man, who grew up in a household where his needs and his comfort were consistently secondary to the adult's narratives. That is not a small claim, and it is not one being made carelessly. It is a pattern that multiple cultural commentators, from D.L. Hughley to Dave Chappelle, are pointing to with increasing directness. Jada has also received pointed criticism for her perceived emotional distance from Jaden. People who have watched her public behavior closely over the years say that visible, warm, spontaneous maternal affection has rarely been part of her public presentation with him. Whether that reflects something real or is simply an artifact of what gets captured on camera is something only that family truly knows. But in the court of public conversation, perception matters, and the perception is damaging. The industry machine and what it does to children. One of the through lines in Dave Chappelle's body of work, and in D.L. Hughley's commentary, is the reality of what the entertainment industry does to young people who enter it without protection. Jaden Smith entered the industry as a child. He appeared in The Pursuit of Happiness alongside his father when he was just 7 years old.
People can't do something themselves. They want to tell you you can't do it.
By the time he was making the Karate Kid remake, he was 11. These are formative years, years when most children are learning to navigate friendships, school, identity, family dynamics in a relatively normal environment. Jaden was navigating all of that in front of cameras, on global press tours, with the weight of famous parents' legacies already attached to his name. D.L. Hughley pointed out that while Jada was dealing with her own complications, Jaden was being fed to an industry machine without the kind of parental presence and grounding that could have helped him process what he was going through. The machine doesn't care how old you are. It doesn't pause for emotional development. It doesn't ask if you're ready. It just keeps moving, and you either find your footing or you don't. And for a young man watching, in real time, his family become tabloid content, watching his friend's relationship with his mother become a global conversation, finding that footing must have been almost impossible. That is the core of what Chappelle is pointing at. Not just gossip, not just pointing fingers for entertainment, but a genuine interrogation of what we allow to happen to children when we put fame and image ahead of their actual well-being. What Jaden has actually said. In the middle of everyone else talking about Jaden, it's worth listening to what Jaden himself has actually communicated. There have been moments, not performances, not red carpet appearances, but unguarded, raw moments where Jaden has given the public glimpses into what it has actually felt like to be him. He's alluded to betrayals of trust. He's spoken about asking for privacy and not receiving it. He's described feeling like things he shared in confidence were passed along to others almost immediately. He's spoken about feeling unseen in ways that go beyond normal adolescent alienation. He has used language that suggests someone who has been managing more emotional weight than he should have been carrying at his age, and has been managing it largely alone. There is a moment that circulates online where he speaks about asking his mother to keep something private, to hold that down, to not say anything, and then finding out almost immediately that other people knew. That the thing he asked to be protected became public almost before he could process asking for that protection. That detail, that specific, human, heartbreaking detail, that is the thing that makes this conversation more than celebrity drama. That is a son describing what it feels like to not be protected by the person who is supposed to be your first and most reliable line of protection. And when you hear that alongside everything else, the August Alsina situation, the Scientology questions, the public moments that have had people genuinely concerned about his state of mind, a full picture starts to emerge. Not a perfect picture, not one with all its answers, but one that demands to be taken seriously. The double standard and why it matters. Let's return to something D.L. Hughley raised that deserves its own space in this conversation: the double standard. When the August Alsina situation became public, the dominant response was shock, some criticism, and then, fairly quickly, a kind of cultural shoulder shrug. The entanglement label became a meme. The red table talk moment became content, and within a relatively short period, Jada Pinkett Smith was back in the public conversation on largely her own terms. Now DL posed a direct hypothetical. If Will Smith had been romantically involved with one of Willow's friends, a young woman in a vulnerable state, someone Willow had personally introduced to the family, what would the reaction have been? There would have been no memes. There would have been no shoulder shrug. There would have been no red table talk softening the narrative. The outrage would have been swift, loud, sustained, and professional consequences would have followed almost certainly. That asymmetry is not a small thing. It is not a technicality. It speaks to how we selectively apply moral standards based on gender, based on celebrity, based on how palatable the presentation of a person is to us. And it means that a genuine harm, if harm is what occurred, got processed as content rather than as something to actually reckon with. And who pays for that? Jaden pays for it. August paid for it. The people closest to the situation, with the least power to control the narrative, always pay for it. This is precisely the kind of cultural accountability gap that Dave Chappelle has built a career pointing at. Not to be cruel, not to destroy people, but because he believes, and has always believed, that the truth, spoken clearly and without apology, is the only thing that actually changes anything. Where this leaves us. So here we are. Jaden Smith is in his mid-20s. He is trying to build a career in fashion, in music, in acting. He is trying to establish an identity that exists separately from the weight of his parents' fame and his parents' very public personal lives. And he is doing all of that while the internet periodically digs up every strange moment, every concerning clip, every detail of a childhood and adolescence that played out under a microscope. The voices calling for accountability are getting louder. They are not fringe voices anymore. D.L. Hughley, Dave Chappelle, industry insiders who have watched this family closely for years, regular people who have been watching Jaden's public behavior and feeling genuine concern. The questions being asked are not going away. They're multiplying. Was Jaden adequately protected as a child entering one of the most predatory industries in the world? When the situation with August Alsina unfolded within his own family, was anyone looking out for what that did to him emotionally? When moments that should have been private became global entertainment, was anyone holding space for what that cost him? And the larger question that Chappelle forces, when we keep consuming this family's drama as content, are we part of the machine that failed him? Are we doing what the industry does, taking what belongs to someone's private life and turning it into spectacle, while convincing ourselves we're just following the story? That's the uncomfortable place this conversation lands, and it's the place that separates gossip from genuine cultural reckoning. Now we want to hear from you, and we mean that seriously, not as a formality, but because this conversation genuinely needs more voices in it. Do you think D.L. Hughley and Dave Chappelle are right to connect Jada's past choices directly to what we're seeing in Jaden's behavior today? Or do you think that's drawing a line between two things that aren't as connected as people want them to be? Is Jaden simply navigating the weird, pressured public life that comes with being a celebrity kid who grew up in the spotlight? Or are the signs we're seeing something deeper, something that points to real, unaddressed wounds from his childhood and adolescence? And what about the double standard DL raised? Would the conversation around this family look different if the genders were reversed? Should it? Drop everything in the comments. This is one of those topics where the comments section tells almost as much of the story as the video itself. Hit the like button if this breakdown gave you something to think about, and subscribe if you want to stay in the conversation as this story continues to develop. Because it is not slowing down, it is getting louder, and we are going to be here, asking the hard questions, every single time. Because at the end of the day, Jaden Smith is not just a meme. He is not just a celebrity kid doing strange things. He is a human being who grew up in circumstances that no amount of money or fame could make easy. And he deserves a conversation that treats him like one. We'll see you in the next one.